Tell you a little bit about our company. Basically, we're a TOC shop, if you like, and we deal with the thinking process, we deal with critical chain, we deal with drum buffer open manufacturing, we deal with replenishment, and weave those things together using throughput accounting as the basis of measurement and behavior drivers to deliver results. Who are we? We were born out of Dr. Goldratt's theory of constraints, and we've been delivering insight and profitability to our customers for about 4 years now. And what we're in the business of implementing processes that significantly improve business profitability, and which enables people to work on their business and not in it. And you'll see that coming through is that most of the work that we've done in terms of critical chain has enabled our clients to be able to gain visibility and gain control over their systems. Our consultants, what we aim to do is to tailor new processes, manage their rollout, and then train our clients to take ownership of them. And this approach consistently yields outstanding results. Our aim is to weave into the fabric of the organization with whom we deal the capability to be able to do what they by themselves. We believe we're a valuable ally, and our goal is to find a better way for our clients. Our personal goal is within 5 years, which would be by June 2007, from when we set this goal, is to embed constraint-based management as the core operational methodology in 5 of Australia's top 100 companies. Because we believe if we can do that, then the rest will follow. Okay, what we have here is just a variety of companies which in a variety of applications, and I'm going to talk to where critical chain was implemented in Breville, which is consumer electric appliances, in Bombardier Transportation, which was in trains, the design of trains, not the manufacture part of it. Computer Science Corporation was in defense, and there's another one there that was in apparel, which is not up on that list. But there's a variety of different businesses there who do different things, and I think that the interesting part about it is that the TOC for me acts almost like as an operating system, almost as if it was the Windows of how businesses should be run. And tools like Concerto and organizations like ourselves see ourselves as integrators of your specific applications into that operating system, right, to enable the results. So the implementations that I'm going to talk about will be this Bombardier Transportation, which is the engineering design of about 800 million Australian dollars. The Oz dollar last seen at around about 75 cents to the US, 75 US cents to the Oz dollar, worth of diesel and electric trains. Breville was the NPD division of a leading consumer appliance company, introducing approximately 200 new products in the global marketplace per annum. SKYE is a fashion design studio for Australian licensees of Oshkosh, Pierre Cardin, and Tier. And Computer Science Corporation was the integration of the avionics and target acquisition systems in the final build of an Australian Air Force project. I thought I'd just go through briefly our method, because we spend quite a bit of time in developing methods so that for 2 reasons. One is that we could leverage our experience and leverage the scarce resource that we are, and I think that pretty much anywhere that demand will outstrip supply with the kind of results that are being achieved. So we figured that it was something that we had to do. And the other part about creating method was that we were able to produce repeatable result, was to be able to take variability out of the implementation part, to try and put some science into, well, what did work and what didn't work. So in broad outline, the concept part is the first engagement with the client, where we try to understand what are their problems about, and then the sales proposal or a solutions proposal to say, well, can we meet you with what the smarts are that we have, what the issues are that you have, and how do we take this very powerful methodology, which is shifting into a different paradigm, and how do we make that happen? All the issues that you talk about in terms of senior management buy-in. In the development phase, we would do a constraint analysis, so we use the thinking processes to inform then a project management plan which deals with all knowledge areas within the PMBOK of how this project is going to be rolled out. And then once we've done that, once the PMP is done and that we all know where we're headed, and this is a business improvement project, but there's no reason why we don't put the same discipline into that as we do to any other type, whether it's MPD or capital projects or anything else. And believe it or not, we use Concerto to execute those projects and use it for the resources, even the resources who may not be involved or know very much about what Concerto is or what critical chain is. It's very simple for them to be able to get onto the browser, they can see it on our server, and they can say, that's what I've got to do today. And that might be something like mapping a process or finding some data for us or defining some sort of thing. Then the implementation part starts, and we'll do a system analysis. There'll be a lot of process mapping and understanding, and very often there, what becomes unbundled is the logic of how people put their projects together. And so those of you who are familiar with Concerto, a very, very powerful thing in the time-to-market planning piece is when we identify the critical chain and exploit the critical chain of the various projects that they're doing, suddenly the assumptions that are being made about where can we do concurrent engineering and where can't we do that pop up. What assumptions are we making about what specific competency is required in order to be able to do a task and what isn't, and you can exploit that. And that yields big benefits, because in a number of the cases that I'll talk to, they actually had more work than they had resource available, and the classic way of dealing with that is throw more resource at it. And that can actually slow things down enormously, because then your competent resources are busy training the non-competent resources. Okay? Then the solution design into solution implementation and testing, and then ensuring sustainability. So we would build it into the standard operating procedures of the client, so that by the time we've gone with all of that, that it's kind of, this is the way that we just do things around here. This is just how it's done. So let me talk about, the context. I'm going to talk about why did these customers choose critical chain and what were the benefits then of them. So in this instance, we first worked with the signaling division in 2001 using the single project method. Okay? The company was owned by ABB, then Daimler Chrysler, and ABB, then Daimler Chrysler alone, and then finally Bombardier. So you can imagine it was an awful mess of methods and things. And they had a severe case of change-itis. So we were hardly embraced with open arms, because at the same time as we went there, they were trying to integrate SMB, which is Bombardier's manufacturing methods. There was BARN being put in, Six Sigma was being put in, there was all this sort of stuff being put in. But one thing that they knew was that they needed something to do with project management. And right at this time, when morale was low, change-itis, system breakdowns and everything else, 2 large train orders came in. And these things have very long sales cycles. And they came at the same time, after this very long period. And this was after a very long period of very little work. They had a lot of maintenance work that they did with trams and trains and things like that, but the build part of it they had very little of. And just to add to the complexity and the culture into which this thing was going, engineering happened in Brisbane and the head office was in Melbourne. The engineering part was ex-ABB, the manufacturing was somebody else, and with different cultures and very poor definition of interfaces. And that was one of the critical pieces, is that it's much more to do with the interfaces than it is to do with what goes on within the actual department. And what their existing method for dealing with this stuff was the MS project for schedule and earned value for progress. Why CCBM? Why did they choose it? Well, they had this massive increase in workload with the finite skilled resources in the national pool. There had been a disintegration of the capability that was there to deliver these things. And the visibility was required across the country and the world. I told you, even in the country, they were across 2 different things, and their reporting matrix was horrendous. And the Bombardier method demanded harmonization of functional schedules. So that was design, procurement methods, manufacturing methods, and so on. And the frame was very tight with high liquidated damages. These things had happened, the contracts were actually signed very late, and they were on quite tight schedules. And they'd had a good experience of buffer management in the signaling project. But they didn't really know how this was going to translate into a multi-project environment, but they'd got a good result there. So the benefits from them, they had identified the pacing resource early on. They actually cancelled the recruitment of 8 expensive engineers, as Concerto objectively demonstrated that they were not required. And this was another big win that we've had throughout with Concerto, is that it has consistently demonstrated with fact that you can go and say you don't need these people. You know, you can look at what the resource chart looks like, and you can show that. The CC planning profoundly challenged thinking about the logic of the schedule network. The chief engineer who was there was, 1 point short of seriously a genius, who had a photographic memory that could tell you on task number 435 what his predecessors and successors were 3 months after he had done that thing. And he said the biggest single thing that he had that produced benefit was it seriously challenged his assumptions about task dependencies, about what resource types and competencies were required, and about durations and all of those sorts of things when we went into exploiting the schedule. It helped significantly in the harmonization of the departmental schedules, so it gave people the ability to bring all of the independent schedules together and to build them together into a program. And it highlighted the shortcoming of the assumptions of long lead time procured items. So and that was some quite serious stuff. And the engineering output was delivered on time. Breville had grown fivefold in 8 years without changing MPD process. Okay? The MPD process was largely spreadsheet driven. $2 million of EBIT was lost from late delivery of product to market in the 1 year that we were there. And that was easily $2 million of EBIT that was there. That was, we could actually put our finger on and say, here was items which there was promotional sales that were deals that were done with retailers that they couldn't deliver because the stuff was late, because you have two basic selling seasons, Christmas and Mother's Day, and they missed them. Innovation process was drowned out by almost hourly crisis meetings. Every time anything arrived, it was stop, drop everything, meeting, and they'd have to call everybody that was involved, and then they'd all go back again. Saying, well, isn't there a better way to do this? The competitive position was slipping against its major rival, and the staff morale was at an all-time low. People just did not have time to do that thing which they loved. The whole purpose of the business was better ideas sooner, and it actually got strangled. It was actually choked out of the business altogether. Why critical chain? Well, we had done an exercise with them in putting drum buffer rope in their warehouse operations, and they'd got significant results out of that. So they had confidence that TOC was a method that could deliver, and they got it in respect to finite capacity. For them, speed to market is essential. We were talking earlier about in certain product cycles where time to market, I mean, the cash difference that they could have by missing Christmas could mean that they missed the year. That's it. It's gone, you know. Design work was done in Sydney, development production mostly in China, and they needed a universal view of management support information. And they needed a means of working with marketing to decide what not to take on. The benefits was that all product planned for major launches on Mother's Day and Christmas delivered on time. That's this year, so the Christmas shipping is actually happening now. It's all on time. Increased capacity from the same resource base. That's more product per engineer. The Innovation Forum created and time planned to do innovation, so it actually cleared the decks and enabled the operations to sort of happen as a hum in the background and them to be able to focus on the actual innovation part. Much better idea of how the NPD process work with continuous improvement. And they have an objective means of working with marketing to determine which products can and cannot be developed. So they have a means by which they can actually say no, or if not no, then you have to make a choice. You have to decide if it's this product or is it this product. Which one has the most potential in terms of throughput? And they have far better bang for buck of their pacing resource, which is these design engineers. They happen to have in their studio a couple of really, really talented engineers who are both very capable in both form and function. And they determine on their own tool product how much actually gets through the pipeline. And in terms of managing them and protecting them from the unimportant, that's where they've received a huge amount of benefit. The SKYE Group, this is in apparel. How am I doing here? They're a leading designer and wholesaler of the Pierre Cardin, Oshkosh and Tier brands, and the handling of range development processes for each of these was done informally and in an ad hoc way. The designers were seen as king. People perceived that they had more work to do than the time available in which to do it, and the selling price of their goods was often 10% higher than their competitors. There was a risk of losing market share to branded competitors and mass merchant retailers. And ranges were late to market with innovative ideas. So there's this big pressure on all the time, particularly there's the whole WTO regime that starts off in January 2005, where the retailers now in Australia, it's a different way that the market operates there to here, but the retailers now are saying, well, they can bypass wholesalers and go directly to China. So you have to have a point of difference. You have to have a design edge. You've got to have those sorts of things. Why critical chain? Again, this was a client that we've worked with for years now. They've achieved fantastic results by implementing DBR in their time manufacturing division. They'd achieved good results using critical chain single project in their swimwear division, but the software tool was too cumbersome for multi-project management. They needed to synchronize the efforts of all departments around the critically constrained designers and needed a means to stop chronic multitasking. Even the designers were in the habit of multitasking. You know, they would go and pack sample boxes and send them off to China and go and receipt them and do all that kind of stuff. And with a mature understanding of TOC within their organization, we released an enormous amount of their management time that had been spent firefighting, expediting, and doing those things. And what they needed was a simple means by which non-professional project managers could get relevant management support information. Designers, fabric pattern makers and that sort of thing, they're not interested in the language or capability maturity models and Gantt charts and all of that kind of thing. All they want to know is it red, green, or yellow? What should I do? What's the most important thing for me to do today? The benefits, within a matter of months, the lead time and sampling costs in the design studio were each reduced by approximately 30%. And this is a quote from the CEO, a guy by the name of Philip Zylstra. He said, "The impact on visibility has been dramatic. It has made managing the whole area a lot better and a lot easier. Now everyone knows what is meant to be done when, so designers work on what is most important, not on what they like doing." That's the subordination issue again. And we can see straight away if things are running off track long before they turn into disasters. So our planning is much more proactive than the reactive method we used to use. SKYE reduced the number of designers by 60%, whilst at the same time increasing the number of rangers by 30%. Quite a stunning number there. And the due date performance for planned rangers is at 100%. They're on time all the time. And in fact, what happens is that the transition from starting early just in case to get used to the idea of starting as late as possible. And it's almost at the point now where they could actually fit another range in altogether. You know, they could actually add another mid-season range in. Finally, CSC, the wholly owned subsidiary of CSC in the United States. The Defence Contracting Division had come to the rescue of a troubled helicopter project for the Australian Navy. Everything was ready, by the way, in this contract. They had the hangars, they had the people trained, they had everything other than the helicopters. And it was the subject of much investigation by Senate committees and all sorts of things going on. So it was a very, very visible thing. And it was very complex integration required between Prime and US Prime and subcontractors in the US, the Australian Navy, and CSC in Australia. So it was a very complicated integration. As I said, the Senate inquiry launched into reasons for overrun on both cost and schedule. There was a very high risk of failure due to technical complexity and extended communication lines. Why critical chain? They'd used TOCA at the start of the project, which had been 2 years prior, okay, to run a thinking process workshop. And they needed to understand the absolute limits of their critical chain duration. It wasn't so much that they were the ones that were on the hook for failure, but they had charged in as the white knight to save the Australian Navy, and they would either get covered in glory or they would be associated with the muck if they'd failed. They needed a proven means of managing schedule contingency, and they had to work across 2 development sites, one in Sydney and one in Adelaide. They needed to synchronize all contractors for integration and acceptance testing. And then the last part was that the guy did when he actually signed the contract. He said, well, the truth is that they'd looked at everything else and they had nowhere left to turn. The benefits were that they gained profound insights into the logic of their schedule network and how they were going to build their software. It was revealing for us, to say the least, as to how the process of developing the schedule forced them to think about the content of what they were doing and the sequence in which they were going to do that content. They identified their pacing resource. They ran buffer update meetings every 2 days to focus attention on where the work needed to be done. They said that for them was the most powerful thing that it did. It acted as a very powerful communication mechanism and allowed them to focus on what needed to be focused on. There was objective buffer information which stopped bug passing and second guessing. So again, this thing about objectivity, you know. Able to demonstrate objectively when other contractors or the Navy were causing delays, because what would often happen is that there would be a mud or a soup, you know, that was there. No, it can't possibly be us, it must be them. But you could actually demonstrate, well, hang on a second, you haven't delivered your build, or your test hasn't been done, or your configuration hasn't been sorted out, and so on. And what the VP of Defence said, that's in the CSC, the Australian VP of Defence said, he says, you guys brought us 3 trumps. He said the TRC philosophy, the Concerto tool, and TOCA's consulting.